We were both born in Pocatello. I was born on November 22nd, 1937 in the Old General Hospital, the same as she was.
Delivered by Dr. D.C. Ray.
Yeah, both by the same
Brothers.
doctor. So at least I grew up in Pocatello until I was about 5 years old. My dad got transferred during World War II to Cumberland, Maryland. His job was considered necessary for the war effort. We spent 8.5 years in Maryland, and there was no organized church when we went there. Dad was not active in the church, and Mom was a relatively new convert, I guess. But while we were there, they decided to organize a branch. Dad made Dad an elder and made him branch president. He was the only priesthood, and he gave most of the prayers, blessed and passed the sacrament, did all the clerk work. And my sister and I took turns giving 2.5-minute talks. When we started meeting in a family's living room, and we moved to a room over Jesus Saves. And Dad and I would go in early on to get the place ready, take out the beer cans and the cigar butts, and start a fire in the old barrel stove. And sometimes we had some strange noises coming up from the Pentecostal meetings downstairs. Moved from there to the railroad depot in Cumberland, which was interesting. We had to stop everything. The old steam engines come in and took off because you couldn't hear anything. And occasionally you'd get somebody dropping a nickel in a jukebox outside, and we'd get strange music in our meetings. When we left in 1951, we were actually renting the basement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. When I was baptized in the Third Baptist Church because they let us use their font.
I grew up in a little white house that my dad built, the one-room house, and we lived in it until I was 5. Then moved into town. Then we had a sidewalk. I lived on my roller skates and my bicycle. And we played cowboys and Indians all the time. A lot of neighborhood kids. And we played hide and seek and the night games that our grandkids play now. Had so much fun. Lived in that house until I got married. When I was senior in high school, I trained into the telephone company as an operator, and that was in the days of number please and I'm sorry, the line is busy. And I met this guy. Met on a blind date. Guy in my ward kept trying to get me to go over to the Institute, and my dad was bishop and he wanted the count in the ward, so he didn't want me to go to the Institute. But then the guy in our ward called and asked if I would go on a blind date with one of his buddies for a toboggan party at the Institute. And I did, and
voila.
that was it. It was fun, and when he took me home that night, he asked me to go to church with him the next day.
How long did you guys
And
stay
that
for?
was a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
I think her dad tried to keep us separated a little bit too. She gave me a picture at one time, an 8x10 picture of her graduation picture, and signed it, "Love Forever, Deanna." When he saw that, he said, "Deanna, remember, forever is a long, long time, and it's even longer if you're not happy."
and yet it didn't take long. And my dad loved him. He just, he thought the world of Dick.
Yeah, we've enjoyed a good life together. We met on the 11th of January, 1958, and we're married on the 18th of September of 1958.
And in between there, he asked me to go steady on Valentine's Day in February and asked me to marry him on my birthday in April.
Oh, we were slow. I don't think we had anything terribly exciting. A lot of our dates were to stake dances. They held a stake dance every Saturday night in Pocatello with a live band. We went to a lot of stake dances, saw a few movies, didn't do a lot of traveling around or anything of that kind.
I told the grandkids the other day that we used to do the jitterbug, and they didn't believe me.
Interesting day. We got married in the Logan Temple. Had breakfast or had lunch at the Bluebird Cafe, and we had $6 left for breakfast the next morning. That was our honeymoon.
I love it.
And we had bought a little tiny trailer house, 8 by 28, that we had moved out to Mud Lake because I was working out there,
Where were you working?
out on the nuclear site, working for GE. They had a project they called aircraft nuclear propulsion. They were trying to develop a nuclear aircraft engine. I had the most mundane job in the world. I was graphing reactor data, and that was where I finally got into computer work.
He was
You know,
on
we had to
table.
get rid of our table and chairs so we could put
That's
a crib
right.
in.
You put a crib. That's what it was.
And the crib covered up half of the couch, so our seating was half a couch in that trailer.
We could go from the middle of the couch into the foot of the bed. And that was how much space we had.
But we had a huge bathtub. It was almost big enough that I could, if I doubled up my knees against my chest, I could sit.
I was out watching for him to come home from work one day, and a couple of the women in the trailer court came over and said, can we see in your trailer? It's so exciting to have newlyweds moving. So I took them in and I opened drawers, and they said, these are your dish towels? And yeah. I had embroidered, I had a hope chest of stuff. And they said, they look like they've been ironed. And I said, yeah, they iron them. That lasted for about 2 months. And then I had other things to do.
Important lessons while we were there, though.
Yep.
Learned that the Lord takes care of us if we do what we're supposed to do. Because we had not enough to pay the bills and tithing, and the Lord doesn't send out a bill every month. That kind of slipped aside, and we got a little farther behind, and we did what would not be thought very smart today probably. We went to a loan company and borrowed some money to pay the tithing because we'd talked to the Lord, and He said, you don't remember your lessons very well. So here we go to a loan company to borrow money that when we can't pay the bills we've already got. But we dropped the money off our tithing off at the bishop's house on the way home, and when we got there, our landlord, who had a little service station there, was literally sitting on our porch waiting for us to come home, and he said, Dick, I need your help. I'd like you to come work for me. I need some help delivering fuel oil and gasoline to the farmers out here, and maybe do some tune-ups or something now and then. So he paid me $3 an hour, and that was not a whole lot, but it paid the bills and took care of the loan we'd made. So that was. Then we let ourselves get behind again and said, what do we do? And we were reminded that we didn't remember. In the meantime, I'd bought a little Crosley car that nobody knows what is today. They quit making them in 1951. And it was literally a basket case. The engine and transmission had been disassembled and sitting in a bushel basket in the back of the car. And I rebuilt that motor and had put it all back together again, had the dents all dinged out, and had it primered. And the guy that I worked with was he had a veterinary business as well. So he come down not long after I got it put together and said, you know, you've had your fun with that car. I could use that in my business. I'll give you $150 for it. That's what I had in it. That was just enough to get us caught up again. So we've learned our lesson, and we've been true to that ever since, and found out there were a lot of blessings from it.
Yeah, bought a house up on the hill, just like 3 or 4 blocks up above the hospital. And that's where, tell them how much the house was.
$13,500. New home.
Man, I wish we could buy a house for that.
3 bedrooms with a basement.
I definitely wish we could buy a house for that.
And we said, boy, never again will we pay that much for a house.
The payments were $105 a month. And I thought we'd gone into debt for our whole life.
Gosh.
But we could choose between that house with the basement or the house across the street that had a fireplace.
Mhm.
So we were happy to get the basement. And we were happy there. We had 2 babies there in the hospital. It was kind of strange because,
Had one, just Debbie.
that's right, we just had Debbie. And all these years later, Steve and Vivian lived in Rexburg, and they had theirs in that same hospital that Debbie was born in. So, pretty cool. Then we went to Phoenix. I don't think there was a day that we didn't want to leave Phoenix. And people kept saying, you'll be sorry, you'll be back in 2 years. And
We did go back once.
we've been so thankful to not have to be there.
We went back for Marcy's wedding. Loved the people down there. It was
Yeah.
a
The
very
people were
cosmopolitan
great.
society. A lot of people wanted to live in Phoenix, and so they didn't have a lot of family with them. It was easy to make friends. And the church was good and strong. We enjoyed the people, but Phoenix didn't appeal very well.
The weather really
We didn't have, there was no air conditioning. We had a swamp cooler on the top of the house, no air conditioning in the car. But fortunately, we never saw the temperature get over 117.
We had a doctor there, Dr. Axelrod. Lynn kept spiking a real high fever. All of a sudden it would go up to 104, and I couldn't get it down, so we would take him across the road over to Axelrod's office, and he would just look in his throat and say, yeah, it's tonsillitis, and give him a penicillin shot. It would hurt so bad. And I think that's why Lynn was always so afraid of shots. And he said he could always imagine what's in those metal cupboards. And even if they were gonna poke his finger, he had to lay down as an adult even, or he would faint. So, in fact, when I had the hysterectomy, Dick brought the kids up to see me, and Lynn came to the door and kind of stood against the door and looked around and fainted and hit his head on the metal door jamb. And they had to take him in a wheelchair down to X-ray
Oh my gosh.
to make sure he was okay. I always felt bad about that doctor in Phoenix because we found out later he had been fired from the Veterans Hospital down there. So that we were happy to get away from there and up to Minnesota.
Yep. Transferred to Minnesota. Did computer site work up there, worked with Pillsbury in downtown Minneapolis. We had lived in an interesting neighborhood. We bought a home that on a cul-de-sac that some people had lived in.
Styles.
Stiles was their name. They had kids who had shot holes through the window screens in the house, all the neighbors' mailboxes.
It was a cul-de-sac and 3 other houses had for sale signs. The signs came down once we moved in.
But we almost lost the house too. We moved in before closing because we needed a place to go. And by the time it came to closing, the house was going up for sheriff's auction because of debts that the former owner had. So, but that finally got straightened out. Ended up we were only there for what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
Then moved to Tacoma.
In Tacoma that Marcy was born, but on the way, Lisa was born in Pocatello.
I went to Tacoma to start the job and go ahead.
I went with the 3 kids, Lynn, Debbie, and Doug, to Pocatello. Stayed at my folks until I had Lisa, and he came down to see us that day and left that next night to go back to work. And when the baby was 3 weeks old, we flew to Tacoma, me and the kids. So, and we rented a house there that was real close to the church. And while they were building our house. So we lived on Forest Ridge Drive, and there was a field across from us that the kids loved to play in, and then a cliff that dropped off down to the Stuck River. But we saw Mount Rainier in the distance. It was so pretty. So enjoyed that. I loved the weather in the Auburn is where we lived. But we got some snow, we got some rain, and some sun. So when our folks would come to visit, it would rain the whole time they were there. And they thought it rained all the time, but it didn't. But we sure enjoyed it there.
Yep, and in order to be able to afford to get into the house to make the down payment, we did part of the work on the construction. We did the insulation in the building. That was part of our initiation into the neighborhood. We did love it there. It was good. The economic times got bad after we'd been there for a while. Boeing was about the only company that was really thriving, so Weyerhaeuser, the company I was working for, they were laying off people. And they said, gee, we don't like to get rid of anybody because last year we laid off the people we wanted to get rid of. So they put ads in the newspapers and trade magazines all over the country to try to help us find work. And they said, if anybody decides that they want something else to do, we'll give you the same layoff benefits, which was 2 weeks' pay, if you have another job you want to go to. So we did. I took another job and took the benefit, and we moved to Omaha, and that was a bad move. I was working at Offutt Air Force Base, which is SAC headquarters, the Strategic Air Command headquarters. They didn't want us there, but the contract that we were working on required it. So we had 12 people there that I was supervising those 12. We were only there for what, a year, wasn't it? A little less than a year. The SAC didn't want us there. So they wouldn't let us have the clearance to work on any of the work to be done. In fact, it was bad enough that had to have an escort to go to the bathroom, literally. And they used that as an excuse to try to get rid of one of the guys we had on the crew that had been transferred there from another GE location because he had a nervous breakdown that the company had caused by working him 24 to 36 hours at a time. So when he didn't have anything to do, he'd kind of nod off because of the medication he was on. So they wanted him fired, and I refused to fire him. I said that would be immoral under the circumstances. And so he and I both went. I took a couple of levels pay cut in the job, but they did finally transfer me to Colorado Springs. They gave us the option of going to Biloxi, Mississippi, or somewhere in Florida or naval base in Virginia, and I said, no, we want to go west. So we went to Colorado Springs.
I want to back up here
Okay.
because we missed a couple of kids. Doug was born in Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah.
Huh?
Yep.
And he was really sick. He couldn't keep any food down, and they kept saying he just needs to get used to it or whatever. And anyway, we took him to a DO doctor, and he did some x-rays, and he had me feeding him, the baby, a bottle of barium so it would show up on the fluoroscope or x-ray or something. And so I said, he's gonna throw up, it's coming. And they said, quick, lay him on the table. And they said afterward, he has an ulcer, a duodenal ulcer. And so he was 8 months old at that time. They said they would just give him a teaspoon of this green stuff, and it worked. And yet the other doctor, the regular doctor, doubted it. He didn't think he had it. So he put him in the hospital. He was there for about a week, and they tested him for so many things. Cystic fibrosis and leukemia and a lot of things, and didn't find anything. So we just quit going to him, went to the DO, and gave Doug the medication before he ate, and everything was fine. We were so thankful to find out what the problem was and to be able to treat it. He was a happy kid. When we lived in Tacoma, he would go across the street and catch lizards and snakes, and he had named all of them. And we got our milk in a milk box on the front porch each morning, and Doug would put the things in there, and then at night he would take them out and go let them go and catch the same ones again the next day. But we were so happy to have him healthy. And then when we were in Omaha,
What? Remember that he forgot to let the snakes go one day.
That's right.
Oh no.
Yeah. After that, our milk was on top of the lid. The milkman wouldn't open it again. Then, while we were in Colorado Springs, we had Dan.
No, he was born in Omaha.
You're right. Why am I?
Marcy was born in
Washington.
Washington while we were there.
Yeah.
And Dan was born when we were in Omaha.
Lisa and Marcy grew up like twins, and people always thought they were twins. And they played together so well. They just were a real twosome. And then Dan was born the last day of school in Omaha.
In Omaha, yep. Went from there to Colorado Springs. I
Like-
was working there in the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, which was a neat, interesting place, but we still didn't have clearances to work there. They finally allowed us to have the clearances, but we were only there a year and a half, and ended up, they decided to transfer us to Montgomery, Alabama. And I said, I'll go there for no more than a year, because Lynn would be ready for high school at that time. And we didn't want to be in Montgomery. We wanted to be able to settle somewhere where he could stay. That was when we moved to Minneapolis again.
I don't think any of our kids liked it except the older boys because we had what kind of motorcycle?
Oh, an old Kawasaki dirt bike that my younger brother gave me.
There was a swamp behind us. And so when we were gone, Lynn knew how to turn it on. I don't know what he did. He didn't have the key. I
No,
don't
there was
think.
no key. The ignition was bad. You had to twist the wires together.
So he would start it and the boys would take it out in the swamp and field behind us and ride it. I think all of them would love to have the old green helmet that they had with the Kawasaki.
Yeah. We were glad to only be there for a year. If we'd have been there for another year, our kids would have lost a year in school. The schools were not really good. So we ended up moving to Minneapolis again and spent 25 years there this time, and
It wasn't red, but it had red shutters and trim.
red trim on it. Had a lot of stucco on the outside.
Big brick. There was a red house 2 doors away from us. Do you remember the covered wagon?
Yes.
In the
I
backyard.
Do. Yes, I do.
I still miss it.
I forgot about that.
I really liked that.
It was an old 2-wheel trailer that somebody had put together as a covered wagon for the 24th of July parade.
And some people bought it that lived, was it 200 miles out west of us?
Yeah, I don't know.
And they towed it out there. But we loved Minneapolis. I think that was pretty much home for all of us.
Kids were pretty much all raised there. The kids?
Uh-huh.
Well, our kids were perfect.
Well, older ones were usually the babysitters in charge. Well, Lisa and Marcy were still good friends there. Lynn, well, all the boys got their mission calls from Minnesota. Lynn went to Argentina. Doug went to South Africa.
Chris went to Argentina. Mike went to, Dan went to Provo.
And Mike got his call just before we moved from Idaho, or from Minnesota to Idaho in 2000. And we took him out with us. We stayed at Grandma Lewis's because it was empty. And we were going to be looking for a house. And 5 days later, we took Mike down to the MTC. And he said it was really strange to get on a bus. He went back past Pocatello to Boise. Well, he probably went the other way, I guess. Anyway, he was how far from Pocatello?
His first area was over toward Twin Falls. He was about 115 miles from us.
People thought that he lived in Idaho and was sent to Idaho on his mission. But he lived in Minnesota when
When he got his call.
got his call.
And we told him we were going to treat him just like he'd gone to Africa, so we didn't go visit with him. Well, it was interesting too because his mission president was a man that we knew in Minneapolis. He'd been a state president and a regional rep in St. Paul. And Mike had actually gone to prom with his mission president's son.
They double dated.
Gosh. That's so funny.
And then he asked his mission president when he was getting married, he asked his President Holt if he would marry them. So he sealed them in the St. Paul Temple. Then we still have some kids. We still had Jana and Chris and Mike, all 3 in the same hospital. That was new for us.
Yeah, our first 7 kids were born in 7 different places.
And then Mom and Marcy have rats.
Turned out she was hatching a whole bunch of little babies, and pretty soon they were all hopping, and we thought it was safe to leave them together for just a little bit, and it wasn't, so we had another bunch of them. So we took them to the pet shop, and they told the kids that they don't feed any of the donated ones to the reptiles. I don't know if they do or not, but I can't imagine they could sell that many babies.
One litter was 12 and one litter was 13. So
Oh
we
my
had
gosh.
in that little cage 27 rats.
Oh my gosh.
But then it was a really sad thing that I did, and never would have done it intentionally. I still feel guilty about it. I had told the kids that the rat cage had to be cleaned and changed, and Friday came and it hadn't been. It was in the back hall right by the kitchen, and so I put it out on the back porch. I said, I can't stand the smell of it anymore, so you've got to get out there and change it. And I forgot it, and they forgot it, and we had, what did we call them? They were all dead.
Was it from the heat?
Yeah,
Heat of the sun. Cooked them.
it was awful. And then they got cats. Marcy got the first one. His name was Lucky. And Lucky got a bobbin of thread in the sewing room and swallowed it. And so it was all twisted up inside of her.
Doesn't sound very lucky.
Had to have Lucky put to sleep. Then we had a litter of kittens, and I bought a bed for the dog at a yard sale, and I kept getting bites all over my legs, up to about this high, just below my knees. And it turned out that's how high the fleas can jump. And we had fleas so bad from that dog bed.
We had to leave the house for a day or two and bomb the house.
It was bad. My visiting teachers came, and I didn't dare have them come in the house, so I went out and sat in their car. It was a good thing when we got rid of them. Dick was bishop while we were in Minnesota. Well, it was me and all the kids on the bench each Sunday. If they didn't behave in church, they had to stay in the car when we got home for that long. Okay, where did we go after that?
After Minneapolis, in 2000, I lost my job. The computer industry kind of went on its ear at that point because of something that they called Y2K, and they thought all the computers would shut down. Well, they hired everybody they could to fix the problems, and it turned out that everything went fine. So when I was 63 years old, I lost a job, and we couldn't afford to continue to pay the mortgage and stay where we were, so we ended up selling the house and moved to Pocatello. Yeah, and while we were in Pocatello, we had Grandma and Grandpa Milward stay with us, and after Grandpa passed away, and Grandma, who was her step-grandma, actually, her stepmom, she actually went to live with her sister.
Her daughter.
Her daughter, yeah. So we sold our house and moved to South Dakota, where Lisa was. Now Marcy came after us.
Right after.
Yeah, then they,
And I just saw the big sign that you guys had made and put up across the living room window. It's in this trunk, welcoming us to Brant.
it was a population of 100. You know, Marcy and Gary moved first, and then
That's right.
you guys and we moved up at about the same time.
time.
And we came here from there and built this house.
He pretty much built the house in Brant.
Yeah.
Remember the garage was falling?
Well, we got it pretty cheap, so,
And we bought it unseen.
yeah, sight unseen.
First time I went into it, I went to get a drink in the kitchen sink and I heard water splashing. I opened the door and they had ice cream buckets under the sinks in the house.
Now, that was almost a complete remodel. kitchen was completely redone. The outside was completely redone, and a big porch added on the front. Then had to replace the garage.
With the potting shed.
Yeah, put up a potting shed about like this one. Well, I knew what it was like to be a runt. I grew up as the smallest kid in the school. When I got out of the 11th grade, I was 5'2" and weighed 85 pounds. And that summer, I went to live on a ranch with my aunt and uncle up in Salmon, or the Salmon area. And that summer, I grew 6 inches and gained 35 pounds between my junior and senior year. And I was still growing after 2 years of college. So.
And I was always the tallest kid in my class from first grade all the way.
And when we got married, I had a 29-inch waist, and I think I was all the way up to 115 pounds by then.
The first 3 weeks we were married, we both gained 15 pounds. And then he quit.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he's always been a gentleman. He still opens the car door and the house doors and just does everything he can to help me. He carries my purse all the time now.
That's what it cost me to get fed. I
Were
was
you 19?
2 months shy of 21.
And I had turned 19 in April, so I was old enough to get married, but he
But
wasn't.
he wasn't.
I had to have my parents' permission because I wasn't 21.
You were too
Girls were of age when they were 18.
Yep.
So his folks had to write a note and get it notarized.
Yep.
We went to Utah to get our license because we were getting married in Logan. So,
Yep. I think that was the biggest travel we had during the whole time before we were married. Going all the way from Pocatello to Logan to get a marriage license.
and I had the bride's book. I took it to the temple and had the sealer sign it, and on our way back to Pocatello for the reception, I realized that I didn't have my book with me. So we went to Bang's Stationers, I think, real quick, picked up an autograph book, and people signed that night. And then I tore those pages out and put them in the bride book, which they mailed to me. And I thought it was really nice. On our 1-year anniversary, we got a letter from the sealer that had married us, and that's in my book. We've been really blessed. We've got a big family, and we haven't had any problems with tobacco or alcohol or drug. We haven't had any serious illness that wasn't taken care of.
And we've never had any shouting matches between us.
No, we've never had an argument. Seems like nothing's important enough to.
I think we just adopted the philosophy that if it's not critical or important, even if there's a disagreement, just drop it.
And so often we agree on whatever, where we want to go. It just seems like so often he'll say, would you rather have this or that? And it doesn't matter to me. Or I'll say, how would you feel about such and such? That sounds really good. It just, whether it's colors in the house or the flooring. I remember making so many decisions about things for the house, and we both wanted the same thing. So it just,
And we love where we are.
yeah.
Can't think of any place we could ever live where we'd be happier than we are here. Dan was close because we bought this lot
That's
from
true.
Dan. They came here 2 or 3 years before we did. Yeah, their lot was 1.25 acres here. So we bought as much as we could get off of this side and still have him have the legal setbacks on his house. So we're only 80 feet wide, but we're about 220 feet deep.
We both feel like we've really been blessed in that we were born to families that were members of the church, and we were taught the gospel, and they took us to church with them. They went with us, didn't drop us off there. I always knew that I was loved. My dad would talk harsh sometimes, but I also knew that I was his favorite. I loved the smell of matches, so when I could, I would sneak some matches, go outside and light them. And in the springtime, they would always put the mattresses out, lean them up against the house with the sun shining on them to air them out. And so I crawled between the mattress and the house and was lighting matches in there, lit the mattress on fire, and I got out. I don't even remember getting out or the mattress after or anything. But when Dad came home from work, he said, well, I think you better go out to the wood pile and find a stick. I think you need a whipping. And so I went out, and I didn't want to get one bigger than I had to. And it wasn't the first time I'd been out there. But I didn't want to get a small one and be sent back to get a big one. So my dad says he came out to the wood pile, and I was sitting on it crying with my head in my lap, sobbing. And he said, and I remember this, he said, oh, poor Cinderella, I think she feels bad enough. She don't need a whipping today. And I don't remember ever getting spanked with a stick or anything. It just, the thought was bad enough, so I never got a whipping.
I had a little experience with a fire too when I was probably about 10 years old out in Maryland. I had a friend, and he and I, our moms would make us a lunch, and we'd go up behind our house up into the hills, and like on Saturday afternoon, and have our lunch back in there. Eugene got matches out, and he was dropping them in the dry grass, and then he'd stamp it out, and it got away from him. And we took our jackets off, and we're beating that fire out, and boy, we scared kids. It probably burned a patch as big as this house before we got it put out. And I can't imagine what would have happened if it had really gotten away from us. And
Isn't Eugene the one that was a minister?
yeah, he was a Lutheran minister the last I knew.
River. And there was a park a couple of blocks from us, and then the river went past the park, and our kids were forbidden to go there. The saying was always, Lewis kids are not allowed. And it could be, Lewis kids are not allowed to ride the bikes on the highway. Lewis kids are not allowed to go by the water of the river unless the parents are there. And so a few years ago, when all of our kids were together, we heard Chris telling about when he and his friend next door went down to the river in the wintertime, and they walked out on the ice and broke through. And he said he could feel the water pulling on him, pulling on his legs. They got out and went to his friends and dried all their clothes before Chris came home. And we never knew about it until just like 2 or 3 years ago.
Fortunately, the water was shallow enough that they could stand in the water.
When I think of Doug, I think of Slick, and I think of his car that he got run off the...
The Cuda.
You tell about that one.
He bought a, I think it was 1950 Cuda that a friend had hot rodded. I mean, it was a pretty hot car,
And it attracted a lot of attention, and one night he was out and a bunch of kids kept taunting him to race with them. He refused, and they ran him off the road. I guess,
Down into where they were
yeah, into
building
a construction
a
area.
freeway.
Yeah, it's where they were building 94 through north part of Minneapolis area. And they ran him off the road there, and I guess he was able to get it back on. Well, no, he got stuck.
No.
We had to go down and get it out.
He called you
Yeah.
about 1:30 in the morning.
Had to go
But
down and
he
had to go
had
down
to-
and get him down onto the construction road where there wasn't a pavement yet. And we were able to get through some barricades and tow the car home, but all it did was break the drag link on the car as far as the car was concerned. So
That he had to run to Super America
yeah,
to get a phone.
probably half a mile.
Guy behind me hit me.
But anyway, she called and told us about it. Are you okay? Yes. And the front of the car was pretty well mangled up, but at any rate, she kept, when it was all over and she got home, she said, "Dad, you make me so mad." And I said, "Why?" "Because you never get mad."
You feel so guilty because you're so nice about it.
But then we bought it back from the insurance company and fixed it up and continued to drive it.
But I think the other kid's favorite story about Lisa.
How to take
Le-
it.
Lisa was babysitting, and I don't know what happened, but she sent Chris to his room. And so Dan wanted him to come out and play, and we had big green civil defense barrels that had wheat in them, and we bagged it or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dan got one of those barrels and put Chris in it. They were downstairs in the bedroom. And he rolled it up the stairs and through the living room, out on the front porch and down the steps. And then Chris jumped out of the barrel and they ran off laughing. And Lisa was pretty mad. Turds. Didn't matter who we left in charge. People were unhappy when we came back. One night we decided to see who does what, and so we left, went around the block and turned the lights off and pulled back into the driveway. And we could see in the living room window what was happening. And I think every one of the bodies that was 12 or younger, maybe there were older ones too, were going like this around the living room, jumping from one piece of furniture to the next, and just hopping. And as soon as we opened the door, everybody was sitting. Well, Mike always complained because he never got to be in charge. And he says, "I never get to be in charge of anybody except the dog." And so I said, "Okay, guys, tonight Mike is in charge. So he will be the one telling you what to do." And so within 2 minutes, he told everybody to go get their pajamas on and get ready for bed. And I don't know how it went. I think he was probably one of the first ones to fall asleep.
Well, Mike was always one that had a temper too. Anything that went wrong, he'd go stomp into his room, and somehow, don't know how it happened, but there was always, it seemed like there was several times that there was a hole kicked in his bedroom wall or through the door, but he didn't know how it happened, and
He'd say, I heard this loud noise. And I turned around and there's a hole in my door. So what did we get him?
well, first of all, we did the repairs, but I stood over him and he did the repairs. But yeah, Mom went out and got him a big stuffed lion and told him when he got mad he could take it out on the lion. But that got to him too while he was on his mission too. They were playing a missionary basketball game and he got hit, I guess, and he went over and hit the wall with his fist and broke some bones in the back of his hand. So today he's still got metal plates in the back of his hand from. and while he was still out, I guess the mission president and his wife come to see him, and he kind of half come to, and he said, "Would somebody tell my wife I still love her?"
And we told you he already knew his mission president. And I was thinking about Jana, and one thing that comes to mind is she was usually her own worst enemy. It seemed like she would run into things. She would run around the corner of the house and run into the dog. Seemed like she had a lot of accidents. Also, I have forgiven her for it. She doesn't think I have. But she cut the hair off of all of her Barbie dolls.
I wonder if she realizes what they'd have been worth now.
I don't know. Chris was always soft-hearted with the pets. He was such a cute baby, and he was just covered with fur and had a lot of black hair. And we called him our little monkey. He was so furry and soft and cute. Chris always liked the smaller the toys, the more he liked them. So he always had a lot of little tiny toys. And he was cleaning out his bedroom before he left on his mission, but those toys, the windows were still lined with all these little toys. And I said, "You're leaving tomorrow. Do you need a box or what? You need to get those put away." And he said, "I want to leave it just the way it looks." And I said, "Okay, I'll pack them while you're gone." But he still has a lot of little toys and likes them.
Well, he has a lot of sentimental values to him too. He collects all the things that we cast off, things that we had when we were young. He's got my old 16mm movie projector that I got when I was 14 years old.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I only had 2 films for it, Abbott and Costello and Gandy Goose. I remember him talking about one of his experiences on his mission. He served in a lot of areas in Argentina that he referred to as cardboard tenements. And they were accosted quite often by some of the local boys, and they tried to rob him and his companion once. And they apparently have quite a phobia for the CIA. They seem to think that the CIA is watching over him. He was wearing his Columbia jacket once with the little zipper pull, and they come to accost him and rob him of their packs. He picked up this zipper pull and started talking into it.
In English.
Huh?
In English.
Yeah, in English. And they said,
UCIA, UCIA, and they took off running.
Dan had problems with some little Indian kids when he was on his mission down in Utah. They would come into their apartment through the window and go through stuff there. And he said they were really cute and he liked them, but they had to get them to stop coming into their apartment when they weren't there. And then there was a group of older guys that were planning to waylay him and beat him up. And so that was a time that they were pretty much saved by the Spirit that told them to go a different way, or that they were there. I don't remember for sure, just but anyway, they were okay. Doug, on his mission, I remember he met a guy that was playing guitar music, and he said that they sang together, and then the guy let Doug play his guitar and sing, and really enjoyed it. Doug played the music for church on Sundays there, and he said each Sunday morning he would go and get the keyboard out of the closet and shake the roaches out of it and then take it and play it. He plays with the band now. I hope we get to see him when we're back there next time. He sings and plays, and I would love to see it.
You gotta know Doug and his size. Apparently, when he was on his mission too in Africa, he had a companion that he said made him look like a midget. And some of the South African people were giving him a tough time, and said his companion went over and grabbed one of them by the back of the head and put his head down on the hood of the car and said, "All right, now leave us alone, okay?" They did. I have a hard time imagining a guy that makes Doug look like a midget.
Yeah, no kidding.
Marcy's kids used to call Doug Big Head, at least Jeremy did, because he's so tall. And so to Jeremy, he was Big Head. Didn't hear as much from Lynn on his mission in Argentina, but I do remember feeling bad when he said that they were out of money, couldn't get any groceries, and they were living on the lemons that grew on a tree there by them, and they didn't have any sugar to put in it. I don't know if it was that bad, but I know that his mission president was a more strict, kind of stern man. We would send him a pair of socks by putting one sock in an Ensign magazine and then the other one in a different Ensign magazine. And he said to write church materials on the envelopes because they wouldn't care about getting that kind of stuff, but the regular mail couldn't get through, so they stole a lot of stuff out of the mail.
Remember Chris too telling him after he got home of some of the things that he'd eaten in some of these bad areas. They'd eat cats and dogs off the street and all kinds of pretty gross stuff. And Deanna was about to gag, and he said, "Mom, I'm not even going to tell you some of the stuff we ate."
I know they had armadillo, and his mission president and his wife had him.
He was his branch president. branch president gave him the
Had
dinner.
him for dinner?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. And then the branch president gave him the armadillo shell and said, take this home to your mother. So he's got it now. I gave the boys their mission stuff back. When we were in Alabama, Debbie loved the sewing machine. And when I went home to Pocatello, I took Dan with me. He was the youngest. And then when I got back to Alabama, Debbie had made herself 2 dresses. And they were so bad. But I didn't say anything when she wore them. She says now, I can't believe you let me go out in public in those. But I thought it was great that she had tried to make them. And she has them now, and I think it's amazing when a kid will try something like that by themselves. And,
But she has become a real seamstress too.
yeah,
In fact, she made one men's suit.
Doug.
What was it, Doug's?
Yep. When she was in school, she took tailoring and she made a suit for Doug. Double polyester.
It's brown.
She played the piano for the choir in high school. They made black suit jackets for it was like Old English type carolers, and she made some of the jackets for the guys.
She does a lot of dance costumes.
That's funny. The first thing that came to mind when you said Marcy was Coosy Cosy Simply. She thought she could speak Spanish. So she would say Coosy Cosy Simply. And Marcy always loved the baby dolls. And I don't think she ever played with Barbies. She wasn't interested in those. I don't think Lisa was either. They got the same dolls for Christmas several years in a row, and I made some doll clothes. My sister Karen made doll clothes for them. Lisa and Marcy had several outfits that were the same. Quite often, Marcy grew into Lisa's, so she would have the same outfits for a long time.
I think all of our boys have become pretty good do-it-yourselfers.
Our girls have.
Yeah?
Dad's done all of the painting and wallpapering over the years, and Debbie and Lisa and Marcy
and Jana.
and Jana.
That's all of them. Yeah.
They do the painting and the whatever, or not handiwork.
Do a lot of crafting. But yeah, they do a lot of the handiwork.
Is that the right word?
Sure.
Okay.
Good as anything.
They're all good cooks. When Lisa worked at the Maid of Scandinavia, I got my mixer. And how long ago was that?
A long time ago.
I still got my briefcase.
I was 18, I think, I think I was 18 when I started at Maid of Scandinavia, and I worked there until just before I got married in 1990.
And she worked for pennies and was able to scavenge things out of the returns.
Yeah.
I've still got my briefcase from that.
A while back, I was describing, is it Zumas or Zumbas?
Zubas.
Zubas, yeah. I was describing them to the kids next door, and they couldn't believe that people wore those pants. Have we got everybody?
I think we're running dry, aren't we?
Well, what about Mike?
We talked about his mission,
Got his mission.
and we talked about his temper.
Stellar babysitter too.
Oh. I have to tell you that Mike was a salesman from the beginning, and he sold greeting cards and Christmas wrap door to door in the neighborhood, and people would buy from him. And when he got a little older, if he wanted $5, he'd go out in the garage and build a birdhouse, go down the street and sell it for $5, and then he could go to the mall or whatever he was wanting the money for. So he's always done real good at selling himself and selling things, and I think that's great.
Well, a couple of boys have done that. Doug was always a good sales type. He had a good sales personality. I think that's why he's got the hobby shop now that he's got. And he did well in the fencing business too.
Dan was pretty much a good kid. I know one time he was on his bike and met Mick Burgoyne, and Mickey told him to say some swear words, and Dan said Lewis kids are not allowed to swear. And Mickey had a BB gun and pointed it at his face and said, "If you don't swear, I'm gonna shoot you." And he just got on his bike and came home. He had a pretty rough time with Mickey and with Tom. He was smaller, and he loved going ice skating. All the boys did. He couldn't very well go there without Lynn and Doug there with him. I have a picture of him sitting on the back porch with his tablet and pencil and drawing Bandit's doghouse. That's the first drawing I saw, and yet when we were in Pocatello, he was sitting out on the patio in the back just sketching, and I don't know what he was sketching at that point, but it just looked so much like the one of him on the back porch in Minnesota at 4 years old.
You still see him if he's in a meeting or something, he's sketching whoever's talking at the pulpit. Or he's doing a mural on the American Legion building downtown. Big full wall mural, patriotic mural.
Now Jonah sits in church and sketches.
You won't see much on the building down there now. He's just started outlining it. So.
He has a talent that was given to him by Heavenly Father.
Yeah, I don't know where else he would have got it. It doesn't run in the family.
No.
Of course, I think in a way that's Brian's history too. There's some musical talent in his family, but it's nothing like he's got.
Well,
And I don't think in some respects I don't think that that's any real kudos just to him, because we've got other kids who have done very well in what they do. It's just that his chosen area is very narrow, so it gets a lot of attention. We run dry.
Anything else? Cool. Thanks, guys.